Hi class. I decided because we were there was requests and we also, were reading The Arrival to do a quick overview of graphic novels. The quick overview became extensive because actually graphic novels you can take a class within itself. So feel free to go forward to just overview this in your free time, whatever. A lot of it is important and that and but unfortunately we don't have a lot of time in this class to concentrate on graphic novels. So, I hope that some of this can be appreciated, maybe if not now, in the future when you're trying to decide, whether to include them in your library or not, or what sorts of graphic novels to include in your library. So, the first thing to remember graphic novels are a form. They are a medium. There are many different types of graphic novels. There are genres of graphic novels, meaning there can be a non-fiction graphic novel, there can be a fantasy graphic novel, like Coraline. There could be non-fiction, like the Burma Chronicles. It's a different kind of format. I also put on here this great graphic novel called To Teach, which is about being a teacher. It's by William Ayres. He's a famous pedagogist. And if you ever have the time to read that novel, it's about, progressive education and, the role of the teacher. So it's even used, in that format for adults to teach teachers. And a lot of people will actually use it if it's like an introductory to pedagogy course. Yummy is a very controversial graphic novel, but it has been used in elementary schools, but it's about, the gang life. But the main character is in 5th, 6th grade. So we'll talk about this more. So graphic novels and manga. We'll talk about manga a little bit later, just to see what the difference is. So presents complex material in readable text, serves as a bridge to more difficult reading, challenges readers of more traditional literature, embraces nature of multimedia world. To fulfill NCTE's, which is the National Council of Teachers of English, 21st century literacies, multiple literacies, which I'll give a definition for shortly. Why graphic novels and manga? 6.3 million secondary school students are reading below grade level. So by the time kids get to middle school, they're already reading below grade level. Average American age 15 to 24 spends only 7 minutes of daily leisure time reading. Students with access to a variety of reading materials have higher average reading scores. All in all, if you can get a kid addicted to reading graphic novels or comics or whatever you want to call them, whether they're of quality or not, in your mind, it will help precipitate a lifelong love of reading. And there's no doubt about it. Tons of studies have proven it and supported it. So there are large appeal to students. It helps increase vocabulary. It helps increase comprehension, writing structure, visual literacy, and visual literacy. Visual literacy refers to a group of vision competencies a human being can develop by seeing and at the same time having and integrating other sensory experience. The development of these competencies is fundamental to normal human learning. And that's from the International Visual Literacy Association. We already spoke a lot about visual literacy in terms of, adult books for little kids, picture books. Visual literacy, it needs to increase as you get older, not decrease. So the idea that graphic novels doesn't provide enough. It provides too much pictorial information and therefore makes students lag on their text complexity and their comprehension with reading is actually, it's a myth. And especially for resistant readers, graphic novels are definitely going to be far more appealing. And visual literacy, even for those who aren't reluctant, still needs to grow as you get older. It doesn't need to decrease. Expanded notion of text. So, new literacy studies re-examines the notion of text, broadening it to include multimodal text which can consist of words, images, hyperlinks, and or videos. To catch up with the staggering changes in media choices that have occurred in the last 25 years, and with that, they mean for how to define literacy. Early in the 1980s, there was Howard Gardner's Frames of Mind, and then there was Len Masterman's, advocated teaching media literacy in 1985, and then scholars agreed Clark, Friedman, Hardin, Hobbes, and Gunther and Kress. Visual literacy is part of multiliteracies, and this is where we're going in the world. And as an English teacher, and it's also included in the new updated standards in terms of the Common Core, in terms of integrating digital literacy in your class, even for the elementary age. It's something that can't be ignored and needs to be reconciled. Writing to image, book to screen. These changes are producing a revolution in issues and effects of literacy and of associated means for representing and communicating at every level and every domain. Together they raise two questions. What is the likely future of literacy? And what are the likely larger level social and cultural effects of that change? So, this is from Gunther Kress, and the two distinct yet related factors deserve to be particularly highlighted. These are, on the one hand, the broad move from the now century-long dominance of writing and the new dominance of the image, and on the other hand, the move from the dominance of the medium of the book and the dominance of the medium of the screen. Because, as you'll see in comics and graphic novels, a lot of the terminology when it comes to visuals actually comes from cinematography and the visual world. So it is really a meshing of the two. Definition of semiotics: the studying of how we make meaning out of gestures, words, paragraph, pictures, and so on. Words are abstract icons. We must negotiate a text to ascertain meaning. In graphic novels, we strip an image to its essential meaning and amplify it. Scott McCloud. Cartooning: it's a way of seeing. So a lot of people are really into, especially in the educational research world, looking at semiotics and how it's changed over the years, to be able to teach the essentials of not just reading the text but reading the world. And today that does include graphic novels, comics, etc. Are graphic novels suitable for our students? Let's be honest, not always. Some content is definitely not suitable for young readers. Look for reviews in School Library Journal, Booklist, Kirkus Reviews, Voice of Youth Advocates, Library Media Connection, Publishers Weekly, and other journals. Ask trusted colleagues and vendors. Look for reviews on the internet. You can't just pick up any graphic novel and assume that it's going to be appropriate for your classroom or in your library. It does take some research, just like any other book. Why teach graphic novels? They capture kids' attention with high-interest characters, eliciting plot lines, reinforce traditional curriculum, motivates kids to read, offer transliteracy skills for 21st centuries. Again, appeals to high achievers, reluctant readers, and ELL for vocabulary and proficiency. ELL students, particularly, wordless picture books and graphic novels are a definite resource to tap. Using graphic novels in the classroom contextualizes the featured language in ways that ELL students in learning how to use the language, or at least use it correctly. There are parallels that can be dealt with, and definitely different kinds of mirrors that can be found in the world of graphic novels. But are they real books? Do they count as reading? Absolutely! They are increasingly accepted by librarians and educators as genre of storytelling, much like novels, movies, and audiobooks. They require readers to be actively engaged in the process of decoding and comprehending a range of literacy devices, including metaphor, symbolism, point of view, narrative structures, plus alliterations, intertextualities, inferences. It's another resource. We'll talk more about the history of graphic novels, but, more and more graphic novels for young adults and for children are getting awards. A graphic novel I highly recommend is Jean Yang's book, American Born Chinese. It was 2007, and it won the Prince Award for that year. And that is for young adult readers, meaning readers. It's an overlap with the Newbery, but it's for 14 and over. How can I use them? Examine context, character narrative, elements of visual storytelling. Reader, the sequence in which frames or lack thereof are read may vary from reader to reader, thus leading to varied interpretations. And that's definitely, as we talked about postmodernism and the importance of, learning how to read new and multimodal texts. It goes along with that. Society, world events, social issues, customs, historical events, and ideological issues. The form itself, critical media literacy. Ask students to question, examine, or dispute the power relations that exist between readers and authors. So the 9/11 report is literally the 9/11 report in a graphic novel. Current affairs, there's another book called Saving the Books of Iraq that is also, quite intense. But, the 9/11 report is actually a really complex graphic novel to read. And when I have assigned it in my classes, even many of my adult students had said that it was the multimodal nature of it actually made the 9/11 report, while more relevant, a lot more difficult to get through than just reading the text itself, because it's literally the report of 9/11 within graphic novel format. Ideas for the classroom: read for silent reading in the class, offer cross-curricular cumulative unit, creative literature circles, teach as a complement to a classic, examine, then write a graphic novel, teach visual reading of novels and film, analyze literary devices. A sample unit: it's just a little clipping. As a group, read and discuss, different graphic novel terminology, and read the first section of your graphic novel silently. Things are all over there. And this is from Step into the Frames, Explore the World Inside, a unit presented at the National Council of Teachers in English by Hart, Roy, and Webster. They're all over, though. You can get whole books on teaching graphic novels and how to use graphic novels across the curriculum. Text selection. This is where it gets sticky. If you're not an expert or a connoisseur of graphic novels, and I would certainly not consider myself one, how do you select them? Well, first you have to think, what idea appeals to you, i.e. identity? What age are your students? Find suggested book lists. Learn the language of graphic novels. Adopt a visual approach, a cinematic analysis. And we can use, actually, I think this is an updated Bloom's taxonomy. But analyzing literary devices, work with a partner, study with the excerpt, find literary devices, analyzing how they create meaning, notice interplay of graphics and text, discuss how impact of literary device differs from that of traditional text. So just as you would use Bloom's taxonomy to help you develop questions for any text, you would use that for graphic novels. So they're not divorced from our literature. They're not, and they shouldn't be, and they should not be treated that way. So what are comics? So there's a battle, graphic novels, comics. What are they? This is Scott McCloud. He's he wrote a very important book, which we'll talk about later a little bit more, called Understanding Comics. And if you really are interested in graphic novels and teaching them, it is a book you should probably pick up. But to him, comics were something that he liked to just read when he was younger. They were interesting, and they were a way to get fast, they were entertainment. Yeah, but so they grew stereotypes of being crude, poorly drawn, kiddie fair, but they don't have to be. As Scott McCloud says, the world of comics is a huge and varied one. Of our definitions must encompass all of these, and so comics is worth defining as it refers to the medium itself, The object is the comic, the book, the strip itself. The definition is very complex. Comics is the word worth defining as it refers to so much. But what is comics? So our attempts to define comics are in our ongoing process. A new generation will no doubt reject whatever we end up defining as comics or graphic novels. But let's take a try here. So the master comic artist Will Eisner uses the term sequential art. The medium we all call comics is based on this simple idea. Images used in sequence. Ultimately, this is sequential art. So this is a very neutral definition, neutral in style, quality, and subject matter. Much has been written on various schools of comic art, particular artists, particular titles, particular trends. Alan Moore, who wrote Watchmen, which was very monumental, is the definition of a graphic novel is a more expensive comic book. So many people say, it's the same format as comic books. Text and illustrations present information. It's a medium, not a genre. Book length usually contains, a full story. Contains some central themes, continuous plot. Doesn't have to be a continuous plot. We can get into that. A longer storyline than comics, intricate themes. It's self-contained, beginning, middle, and end. Again, that's something. That's a convention that's been broken. I've seen graphic novels that have been serialized, and they are of good quality. Generally bound like a novel rather than a magazine-style comic. The term graphic novel has been in use since the 1970s. Some of the first books to be graphic novels was in 1978, Will Eisner's A Contract to God. And we'll talk about Will Eisner a little bit later, but he was actually the only author to receive the Pulitzer Prize for his graphic novel having to do with the Holocaust, Maus. So define graphic novel. So the Prize definition of the term graphic novel is a subject of deep philosophical debate. So how do we want to define it? What are we going to define it? Well, honestly, let's just be honest. It's political. Graphic novel is really a political term. It's part of a growing effort to cast the comics medium in a new, more literary light, apart from the genres usually associated with. It's not, when people say comic book, they think of like Batman or Wonder Woman. I don't know how often we think of Wonder Woman, but definitely we think of, it's always going to be about, some sort of superhero. Maus broke that mold. In fact, comic books, graphic novels have been making their way into university, book clubs, libraries, and even K-12 classrooms. Where did the term graphic novel come from? In this context, it does not mean adult or explicit. First popularized by Will Eisner with Contract to God, as said earlier. It's from collections of comic strips. He called graphic novel sequential art, a series of illustrations which, when viewed in order, tells a story. And that's from Scholastic. So Scott McCloud, to define comics, we must first do a little aesthetic surgery and separate form from content. Now, to McCloud, content and the content of a graphic novel and the content of a comic, he doesn't make any kind of judgments on what is of higher order or lower order, or what is of quality and what is not. He uses the terms quite interchangeably. So, you need to abstract the art form, the medium known as comics, the vessel, which can be any number of ideas and images, from the content. And that's him abstracting it. But, so eventually we get to, kind of examining the comic in terms of all the different mediums, a critical examination within itself, and this is something that's gone on with different mediums in visual art, film, theater. It takes from all of these various disciplines. So the attention on comics is rare, and he's like, let's rectify the situation. So coming to a definition. So in his book, he first goes sequential art, juxtapose sequential visual art, juxtapose sequential static images, juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence. So Finally, he comes to in plural form used with singular verb, juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence intended to convey information and or produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. And as he says, I admit, this isn't the sort of the thing that comes up in casual conversation. So a lot of what Scott McCloud does is, really deconstruct the elements of sequential art and what is needed and what is specific about this specific art form. He also keeps in mind in the digital environment, comics can take virtually any size and shape as a temporal map. Conceptual DNA grows. So here we have, juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence above ooze ambiguity and irreplaceable action. Adding words clarifies, and by blending the visual and the verbal can achieve a meaning neither words nor pictures is capable alone without the other. And this is kind of like going along with what we were talking about in terms of picture books as well. So Gestalt principles of visual perception. So this theory indicates that our minds seek completion and closure. Our minds fill in the gaps, and we tend to see two squares overlapping four circles in this image. You'll see the image on the side, right next to the little McCloud thing, where you see the two blue things. None of those shapes are actually there. There's a form of reading that goes along with transactional theory, which we spoke about with Louise Rosenblatt, where meaning is derived from a personal transaction between the reader and the text in given context, resulting in a subjective interpretation of the literature. As Rosenblatt wrote, there is no such thing as generic reader or generic literacy work. There are in reality only the potential minions of individual literary work. And that's from Reader and the Text. Alan Manning, a linguist, states that cartoons lie closer the photo-real images to language and symbolic thought in the McCloud Pierce. And since cartoons already exist as concepts for the reader, McCloud writes, they tend to flow easily through the conceptual territory between planes and panels, but realistic images have a bumper ride. There's a primary visual existence which